Now, if you have private land, there's a lot of people out there who say, why plant food plots? I don't want to plant food plots. I don't need to plant food plots because I have a great hunt. And I want to try to illustrate why you should be planting food plots, and why, if I had private land, if I leased private land, if I can't plant food plots and I can't plant them correctly to where I can control weeds, control what I plant, get equipment to those areas, plant enough food to last for the season, that I wouldn't buy that land, I wouldn't lease it. I wouldn't even think about it. Why? I could just go hunt public land. I like hunting public land. I do so every year. I went to Pennsylvania last year, shot a real nice buck. Hour and a half walk back on public land, frame pack. I love doing that. And what's cool about that is I just go find the deer. I can try to figure out where they're feeding in the afternoon. I can find the bedding areas. I can get away from hunters. And you could have a good hunt. On private land, especially small parcels, you really have to be very careful about not only the habitat decisions you make, but how you hunt it. And it has to be that several thousand acres of public land, and what you can find in that hunt, you have to match that to what you do on private land. That's why my first book, my red book that I published in 2012, it's Whitetail Success by Design. I wanted to illustrate those concepts that I'd come up with, originated, and how those fit on your private land. But a lot of those concepts came from public land, and that's why the intro and conclusion involves and solely surrounds a public land hunt, because I'm trying to show how these concepts that I teach on this channel apply to whitetail deer, and how you should hunt them, and the strategies for whitetail, and how they relate to you as a hunter, how they relate to each other, anywhere a whitetail roams. So when it comes to food plots, I'm trying to copy what I find in public land and what holds deer in certain areas at certain times of the year, and that definition of movement it creates. I'm trying to fit that same movement and same conditions that I see on public land that occur naturally, and fit them onto private land the best way that they should be fitted. And that involves an on-site consultation. You can't do this over the phone, folks, no matter how cheap it is, no matter who's doing it. You can't do it over the phone. It's all negligent. It'll hurt you. It's got to be done on site if you're having someone look at your land. Don't ever waste your money with online or phone line consultations. That just tells you that that person doesn't have clients, is trying to build their business. They don't have the work, so they're trying to attract anybody they can. Because let's face it, if they had the work to do and work on people's property during the day and walk property and actually learn themselves every property they go on, they wouldn't do it over the phone. And at the same time, you're never going to achieve the accuracy level that I want to put my name on. And I've done this as someone as much as anybody, over 1,000 properties in 26 states. And if I'm not going to put my name on something, I could just sit at home here and talk till I'm blue in the face with online consultations, but I'm not going to help folks. I'd just be taking their money, and it's going to be negligent, because I'm going to tell them to do things in certain areas that's not going to be a fit for their land because I haven't put boots on the ground. It's unfortunate, sad, but very true. So in this case, food plots. I want to talk about why food plots are so important on your land, and this is a pattern that I see over and over again. I've just drawn up a typical 640 acre neighborhood in a partial ag area. You can see these ag areas out here. You can see the rivers coming through, creek drainage, whatever it might be. And I want to focus on two properties. I want to focus on a property that centers right here. And I want to focus on a property that's right here. And then this one right here. I want to focus on these, and let's extend these. Let's say this goes back to the river, includes a little bit of woods. This one goes back to the river here, includes a little bit of woods. So we have property 1, 2, and then 3 over here. And I want to talk about the importance of these. And I talked about this in buck to doe ratios, and why in the neighborhood it's all the same ratio. Someone that's doing a poor job but has lots of food and lots of does and fawns, they're going to see a ratio of 10 to 1, 10 does to every buck. Someone who's not doing much at all, they're just showing up and hunting in the woods, they might actually see quite a few more bucks than every doe. And someone who's having that balanced approach, they're going to see a lot of bucks, a lot of does. It's going to be more balanced, and they're going to be the true herd influence in the neighborhood. And I want to talk about how food is so critical. So let's say early in the season, bucks shift their habitat from their summer range to their fall range, usually about a mile, mile and a half. you're going to see them shift. And a lot of times they're shifting. The reason they're shifting is because they require a completely different set of habitats in the fall that they do in the summer. In the summertime, they want high overstory, maybe some beans in an ag area or alfalfa. Maybe they love the big open hardwoods that are a little bit more cool and fewer bugs than they do out in the open. Mosquito-infested swamps and blackfly and horsefly swamps. They're getting back in the cool hardwoods. But bottom line, they're really changing. They need thick cover, they need fall food, and that's why they change. But in a neighborhood like this, you might have bucks spread out all over the place during the summertime. In fact, where you have the big ag areas up here, you might have a lot of bucks during the summertime where you have lots of open ag, and then you have some cover back here, you have the river. They might be coming out to this ag all the time. This property number 2, they have some green here, they have some food plot space. The problem is when they access their land to hunt, they go right through it, they spook off those deer, and they do that consistently all the time. So we X this property out for actually attracting deer during the fall. They attract deer to those food plots at night because they're hunting it poorly. They actually have a lot of food planted, let's say 8 to 10 acres, but they spook it out all the time, and that pushes bucks off the land somewhere else. These people right here, they might have some really good woods. They have a big block of woods. If you look at this right here, one of the biggest blocks in the entire neighborhood. But it can't be just about the cover, because while they might have some food right down here, those deer might bed up here, these deer are running out of here and getting pushed. That affects the neighbors around them too when you have deer running into your property. At the same time, these deer up here don't have any food to relate to during the fall, during the daylight, on a consistent basis. Yeah, they can come down to this food right here, but they're getting pushed off of it. So not only do they not want to live back here in these woods because they constantly get pushed, they don't want to live up here either. So this property becomes a dead property. Might have the best cover in the world, but if you don't have an afternoon food source that they relate to, why are they going to be there? And what I find, where bucks want to bed, there's no specific number. If someone throws out a number, 150 yards, 200 yards, whatever it might be, that bucks will bed away from the afternoon food source, just shows they don't have the experience to be saying those numbers. It's just unfortunate. But again, UP of Michigan, northern areas, wilderness areas, big woods of Kentucky, Pennsylvania, you're going to find that bucks will bed generally 3/4 of a mile, even up to a mile from their afternoon daily food source, a food source that they want to get to before dark or right around dark. Northern Ohio, northern Indiana, southern Michigan, northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, especially southeast Wisconsin. You get in those ag layers in areas where there's not a lot of cover, and you're going to find deer sandwiched together, and in those areas a buck might only move 100 yards, maybe even 50 yards to his afternoon food source, depending on the conditions and the amount of cover. He might be really sandwiched in and compartmentalized, and that's how far he's going to move. In a typical ag area, you're going to find that window of 200 to 400 yards where they're going to move. So in this case right here, we have some quality food plots on number 3 right here that are hidden. This is too far. You're getting to, this is a mile by mile. So I'm looking at from this woods down to this woods, or even here, we're talking a 1/4 mile plus, probably a 1/2 mile. In some cases all the way down here to all the way back up here, 2/3 of a mile, maybe even closer to 3/4 of a mile. It's too far in a mixed ag land for deer to go up here. And remember, if there's a lot of pressure in here, are they actually going to go through that pressure to get to the afternoon food source? They're not. So you take this parcel right here, and it's a big parcel. But you're looking at food here and food here. There's a house here, switchgrass area right here. So this is all cover. All cover through here. So hidden food sources adjacent to remote cover. River bottom in the back. Enough depth to where bucks in that 200 to 400 yard window can move to that food every single day. If the neighbors come in and pressure them, they'll just cheat to their afternoon's food source a little bit closer. So instead of bedding back here, they'll bed back here, be right here and go to food. They can be right here and go to food, vice versa. So you're working with the appropriate depth that allows you to hold bucks 200 to 400 yards in that mixed ag area. 100 yards or less in a really heavy ag area, and that you have to bump that up to 3/4 of a mile to a mile in very remote areas. That's why being next to and adjacent to public land in those areas is a huge benefit. I've enjoyed that. up in the UP in Michigan when I had my property for 10 years up there. I killed a lot of big bucks back in the public land, a half mile to 3/4 mile away from my land, let alone on the land. So you're really looking at that overall window. You need to understand that balance. Where deer have cover, where deer have space, they take it. They don't want to be sandwiched on top of each other. They want to be spread out, live their own lives. That's a lot less stressful for them. So you get into a property like this. You don't have food plots, you don't have quality food, where do they go? Does and fawns, they might get pushed around. It's like a carousel. They get pushed over here, they get pushed back, they get pushed up here, they get pushed around, but they live in the same neighborhood. Those that are here today are here to stay. They just get pushed around. They can tolerate a lot of pressure. The problem is with bucks, they require better habitat, better food, and it has to be unpressured by does and fawns and hunting pressure as well. So if you have a remote food source on a land over here, a lot of the mature bucks, they get to a point of reclusiveness that they require, that they leave and they find this. And that's why when you have a standing cornfield, for example, a mile away, sometimes it can attract a lot of bucks in late season if there's not other quality food sources in the local neighborhood that you're at. Bucks will move a long ways, but you're adding bucks to that cornfield, not so much does and fawns until you get in the middle of the winter. They'll slowly move over, but it takes a long time for does and fawns to move. Bucks, they move immediately, and if it's not reclusive enough, then they don't move to it. So if this gets bumped out, they go over to this one. They go over to this one. They're willing to travel a mile, mile and a half, 2 miles sometimes to find a food source. They didn't go nocturnal, they just left. And that happens a lot because properties that only have summer food, they leave because they have to have fall food. Does and fawns, they'll stick around. Does and fawns have a fraction of a home range of bucks. And that is why a parcel this size, let's say that's 110 acres, 80 acres. But let's look at this. Let's say this was a non-hunter right here in this area. Let's say that property was divided by a river. Let's say they didn't have food plots. You could X out that one too because there's no food they're relating to on a daily basis, but they're non-hunters. So now you take this piece right here, let's call it 60 acres. So this 60 acres right here, out of this entire neighborhood, becomes the true herd influencer, and they might only have 4 acres of food plots, 3 acres of food plots. Could be a 40-acre parcel, could be a 30-acre parcel like we use here, where we hunt, where we shot all the bucks on last year. You don't need that large of a parcel to become the true herd influencer because it's easy to go around the neighborhood and X out parcels that have high hunting pressure, that don't have enough food and don't have enough cover. And they don't allow bucks to bed within that close proximity to that afternoon food plot that they require for reclusiveness and depth of cover. Depth of cover meaning that amount of cover between food and a buck's bedding area that they require within your area of balance. Again, 3/4 mile to a mile in big wilderness, wooded settings, that could even be in Kentucky or West Virginia. 100 yards or less in those big ag areas, and more of a moderate amount of 200 to 400 yards in mixed ag area. That is why you can take a parcel like this size, it's only 60 acres, with food plots. And especially as the season progresses, especially as hunting season ramps up, hunting pressure ramps up, the amount of people in the woods ramps up, the amount of shooting going on and walking around in general. Think about it, October, November, part of the whitetail shift. The reason those deer are moving from late September to late November or late October is because the amount of local habitat and food is dwindling. The amount of secure food, not only secure food, food that's unpressured, but just food in general. So you get into all the weeds are dying. That's why weedy food plots in summer, that's kind of a joke that, that's a good thing because all those weeds are gone in the fall. The deer aren't eating them. And if they're taking up space out of food plots, if there's 3.5 food plots, acres there right there, I want those to be 3.5 acres of food plots, no weeds going into the fall. I don't want them to be 80% weeds or 50% weeds and look kind of attractive and cool during June and July, and then all of a sudden that food is gone and I only have 10% of my actual food plot going into the fall, and it fails to attract, hold, and allow me to be the neighborhood influencer because there's not enough. This small parcel, the person that owns that and hunts it well and doesn't pressure it, they, out of all this going on in here, people planting food plots, maybe other screening projects, water holes, timber, habitat improvements. These people up here can improve all the habitat they want back in their woods, but if they don't have that afternoon food source in the form of food plots, They don't control the neighborhood. They don't influence in the neighborhood. And maybe they have a standing bean field right here that works really cool some seasons because the farmer's equipment broke down and got too wet to harvest. But when it's plowed under corn the following year in early November, when it's planted in wheat, when it's cut hay, they fail to influence the neighborhood. And guess what happens? If they're not doing this consistently, if you're not doing this consistently from year to year, you don't build anything. It might be good for 1 year, but it's more of a take or pass-through type property. Just as you got lucky for 1 year. You want consistency. Consistency allows you to be the neighborhood influencer. It can happen on a very small parcel, and guess what? If this person right there with that 60 acres, on this 60 acres, if they overpressure the food sources, if they turn those food sources into a nocturnal food source, if the food sources aren't diverse enough and it runs out, I'll give you a great example. 3.5 acres of beans planted for the summertime that are down to dirt. In middle of October, you didn't accomplish a thing. But bottom line, if those food plots aren't available, or if they're unpressured, you X out that one piece that was the influencing piece out of that entire parcel. You X out this entire section because you don't have the conditions to not only hold and advance mature bucks to the next age class or bucks in general to the next age class. You don't have the conditions to actually improve your buck age structure overall on a large scale within the neighborhood. So unless they're happening in a neighborhood over here, they're not happening anywhere. And that's why a lot of places that don't have food plots, have people overpressuring their lands, have a lot of hunters, you just don't get that buck age structure. You put one parcel though and make it right in a neighborhood, even 50 acres, 30 acres, 40 acres, 60 acres, and you can influence an entire neighborhood. And if you don't have that parcel, you don't have a quality neighborhood. So think about that. Why plant food plots? Well, for one, you can't be a herd influencer without them. Two, you might be the only one doing it right in the entire neighborhood, and the opportunity for you to have an incredible hunt, an incredible herd, and experience an incredible herd with the oldest age structure that you can get in the neighborhood to reach your potential is incredibly awesome. It's fun. I look at it like if everyone's doing nothing right there and they're having a semi-decent hunt, imagine what it could be like if you actually do it right and you add food plots and you're that true herd influencer in the neighborhood. Most people never get to see it. A lot of people that work on their habitat over and over again, you can go to the habitat managers Facebook pages, all the various ones online, and they're not talking about these details that you need to be the herd influencer. Who cares if you know how to plant an apple tree or plant a great food plot or make the perfect hinge cut? If you don't understand these concepts of food and that afternoon food source and having a daylight parcel, then your efforts are all for naught. In fact, the more habitat improvements you make, the more you invite deer to pattern you more than them. You have to have that afternoon food plot if you care about whitetails. You know, if it's all about wildlife, you just don't really care about having a great herd, a quality herd. So many people talk about, well, I'm a member of the QDMA, Quality Deer Management Association. I love quality herds. But do you really? If you're not doing your part to actually make a quality herd or understand how to make it, this is how you make it. You have to have food plots, and that's why you plant food plots, because without them, you're not going to be the herd influencer. And that's why, going back to, I wouldn't even own property, hunt property, lease property, unless I could put some food plots in. Because the power of those plots, I'm not doing them for the fun of it. They're a lot of work. I've literally 65 tons of lime on my property in the UP in Michigan. All bags, 50 pound bags. Went through these arms, these little skinny arms. I put on my property to improve the pH, not for the fun of it. I can guarantee you that. I did it because it improved my food plots and it allowed me to be the herd influencer in an area of national forest where the far-reaching effects of what I did on that land probably reached out 5 or 10 miles because those bucks migrated so much. And it gave me an outstanding hunt that I could never have imagined when I started that journey. I want you to experience in that too and be the true herd influencer. Really, if you're not planting food plots, you're really missing out. You're probably only 20% of the way there on your land this year. I want you to be a true herd influencer, and you need to add plots this year. And if you have plots, make sure you do it right. Make sure you don't spook those deer off. Make sure they're true daylight food plots and you're not creating a nocturnal herd, and that you actually give yourself a chance to not only create a great herd, but create a hunt again, you can't have one without the other. If you have a great herd, you have a great hunt. If you have a great hunt, you have a great herd. A lot of times people say, well, I have a great herd. It's all about the deer. That's what I'm doing. The hunting suffers. That probably means you don't have and you haven't reached your potential of what a true quality herd is. And that's all relative to the area, you know, how many people are around and everything. But try food plots this year. Check out my food plot book online. I sell it off my website. We have ebooks, print book. And I think my food plot playlist on YouTube, some people say, oh, I can't wait for you to stop talking about food plots when it gets into the hunting season. But it's probably my biggest one. But even then, I might have 80 videos out of over 500. So it's only a percentage. Enjoy the season. Enjoy planting food plots. And we're going to help you on this channel do it right and to be the true herd influencer in your neighborhood this season.